the awakening of the heart seemed to be a whole different way of being.
Yeah.
And it's almost like moving from the discovery of initially trying to know everything and follow the right way to do it and even try to meditate, to the unhooking or that it led to a not knowing.
Yeah.
And then the not knowingness, there was a tremendous freedom of some kind of not controlling, not having to go to the mind.
Right.
And then as it sank down, the heart, I guess what they call the prajna, a certain quality of knowing which is completely different.
Yeah.
It started in a very slow way, almost like a baby Buddha.
Yeah, yeah.
So it started to know in a way that wasn't referencing the mind, didn't go to the mind for a second opinion.
Right.
And just started to feel from inside that there was a non-separateness with everything. And yet there was also discrimination, but it didn't have to go to kind of subject-object. It didn't have to just divide things up to know it.
To split itself up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could know it directly.
Yeah.
And then there's just kind of this both-and paradoxical, so the sense that, oh, I'm nothing, and I'm also here, and I'm also everything.
Everything, yeah. Yeah.
Just all of a sudden makes sense where you hear it before and you're trying to make sense out of it. So, okay, let me see if I can get that, But it just all of a sudden like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
Yeah. I think what you're saying really corresponds. It corresponds with my experience as well. But I think it seems to me that almost probably 95% of the time when we awaken, it sort of stabilizes in one sense, or comes back to a state of what I call awakened mind, which is what you're talking about, which is a strange way of putting it, because it's not that the mind is awake, but we're awake from mind.
Right.
So, we realize, none of these thoughts define me or define reality. So we're awake on the level of mind, and that's the transcendent witness. And then as you described it wonderfully, then eventually it starts to come into the heart or the emotional body, and that's where most human beings run into a lot of resistance, because even when you're awakened from the level of mind, we're often not awakened. We're actually still identified on the level of emotion in many areas.
That's right.
And so that's that kind of slow settling. But it doesn't just settle. It can only settle if we start to unhook the identity on the level of emotion.
That's right.
And then, as you said, as we do that, then it's almost we're awake on the level of heart, or from the emotional body. So when we're not identified with the emotion, I think I've always found it really interesting when you're not identified on the level of emotion, then or feeling, you're not finding your sense of self through that and all the conflict. Then actually your emotional body has this capacity for experiencing unity or oneness.
Yeah. And it's interesting, even if we look even closer to kind of what is that we've thought of as even emotion or feeling.
Yeah.
Really from the heart, it's like even what we called love, or what we thought was love, was really kind of mixed with a lot of personal story. Like core belief is actually coming up and flooding this innocent heart. And when the heart doesn't have a mind that's kind of telling it stories and kind of telling it, to go out to look for something, and the stories or the core beliefs aren't feeding it, there's the heart, the kind of love is this unconditional love.
Yeah. That
in some ways is a whole different emotional way of being and seeing, that isn't the usual personally fed by this pool below of core beliefs and this mind that tells it, go out and get that, or do this, or feel that, or that's wrong, or that's right,
or filled by emotional attachment, because that can be a very juicy sort of love, this sort of very sticky emotional attachment love. And I think we all come to, as we experience that kind of love you're talking about, which is it isn't personal. It's more impersonal. I like to think of it almost as an indiscriminate love, because it just loves.
Loves everything.
And it doesn't seem to love for a reason.
Yeah.
Like, I love because it looks this way, or it's beautiful, or this person's that, or it just, it's just there.
Right. And it's like, because it's impersonal and empty, it can be intimate.
Yeah.
It's like intimacy with even other beings comes when it's not personal.
That's the interesting thing, isn't it? Yeah. It's totally different from the way we hook it up in our minds.
Yeah.
Yeah. We would think that the personal would be the most intimate, but actually it's the impersonal. Because actually I think we're connecting on the level of spirit, or true nature.
Yeah.
And that's actually, even though that's not personal in the sense of it being about my story about me, in one sense, I think it's the collapsing of the personal and the impersonal.
Right.
We call it like impersonal, so we don't define it as that sticky, separate kind of attachment. But
it's not the opposite either.
It's not away from.
Right.
It's like the collapsing of the two. That's why it's a funny experience, because it's totally impersonal or totally unattached.
Yes.
And yet it feels absolute intimacy.
Yeah.
Absolute connectivity.
And there's almost like a seeing. It's almost like the eyes become connected instead of to the brain. They hook up to the heart.
Yes.
And there's almost like a seeing. So even like being with somebody or seeing somebody, it feels like you're seeing them from the heart without a mind in front.
Yes.
Without all the beliefs and projections and fears and worry about what they might be thinking, or I'm thinking, or who they are.
It's almost like an intuitive connecting of spirit.
Yeah.
And then primarily, and then the exterior is sort of just the exterior.
Yeah.
But it's already connected spirit to spirit almost instantaneously.
Yeah. And that, of course, is what everyone's longing for.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it seems like.
I mean, some kind of, both freedom, but also immanence.
Yeah.
Some kind of, free of suffering, but also aliveness, connectivity, real sense of relating or being a human in this world.
Right.
And that's the amazing thing when it drops and the heart starts being the center. And in some ways, it's not, as you were saying before, it's not like the head was the center and now the heart becomes literally a center.
Right.
There's still this feeling that there's no center. But it's almost like formlessness comes into contact, and like each breath creates a human, and then it sees itself out there.
Yeah.
Like that Nisargadatta quote about, when I look back, I find nothing. And then when I look out and see everything, that is love. So there's this kind of, almost like it's being created and destroyed in every moment.
Almost with each breath. Like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it seems to me also that there's also a quality of this what we're talking about, love, or more awakened on the level of heart, that also has to do with how can we say it's very well, it's when awakening also starts to become ordinary in the sense.
Right.
Like the very ordinariness of human existence is an expression of the absolutely extraordinary.
Right.
And yet we can say extraordinary, but still it's that experience of ordinariness which is sort of extraordinary.
Yeah.
And that's to me that's one of the delights as well, is that just ordinary existence.
Very simple.
Yeah, like, this is it.
Yeah.
Where I always was this is a manifestation of the most profound Dharma.